This is TWiT.
Many seniors are quite comfortable with technology at this point, but some still need a little help. Geoffrey Fowler from the Wall Street Journal offers tips for seniors about getting better at tech. His biggest piece of advice is don't ask your kids. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought it was my daughterly duty to show my parents how to use their devices, but you say seniors should not ask their offspring for help.
Well, here's my question for you. Who taught you how to drive? In a lot of families, that's a very contentious thing as well, because it's like learning a new language, right? Both driving a car and learning how to operate an iPad or a new computer. And the stress that comes with trying to learn a new language can't happen quickly, and it can bring out all of these existing kind of patience issues, right? You're probably much more likely to be patient with a complete stranger than with your own parents. And that's what often gets parents and kids into a pickle when they try to help each other out with tech.
That's a good point. I mean, I haven't taught or thought of teaching my kids to drive. Hopefully they'll just be self-driving cars for them. But swimming is a good example. Like, I did not want to be the one to teach them to swim because it was too stressful.
Yeah. And, families have issues, and especially around aging. There's a lot of implicit ageism that we don't really even necessarily recognize in ourselves. And so when we're dealing with a parent who we've, always thought of as an authority figure, and all of a sudden we realize they're struggling with something, or maybe they're not, not the expert that we once thought of them as, that really stresses young people out. It also stresses out older people because they see all of a sudden how their children are viewing them or treating them differently. When I told my own mother that I was writing a story on this topic, and I do this, full time for the Wall Street Journal, she reminded me, Geoffrey, nobody likes to think that they're stupid.
Mm-hmm. You made a really good point in the article, or I can't remember if it was a quote from somebody else about how, from the younger generation sitting down to, let's say, show their parents or someone older than them how to do something, we're so used to just speeding through it and going, because that's just the speed at which we work. But just the fact of doing that in front of them can almost set them back a little bit, can almost make them realize just how not speedy they are, and kind of doing a mind check on that, because I know I've been in the tech support role for my parents many times, and I usually operate pretty fast. I try and walk them through it, and explain myself along the way, but I've never really looked at it from that perspective before.
Totally. I spoke to a lot of folks who spend a lot of time with seniors trying to help them get up to speed on tech. And one of the things that they really hit at was think of learning new technology like learning a new language. You wouldn't expect that you could all of a sudden learn French in an afternoon or even in an hour. So don't expect that a senior who's not used this device or used the software before can also learn it that quickly. And in fact, imagine what would happen if somebody was trying to teach you French and just started going off in French at 1,000 miles an hour. You would think, God, I can never learn this. And so it can really hurt more than it helps. Also, sometimes well-meaning kids and grandkids go in and they look at, mom or grandma's computer, and they're like, oh, they see all these things wrong with it. Oh, you've got all these old apps. You've got things in the wrong place, and they start moving stuff around, which, again, might be a nice thing to do. But then when the senior goes back to the computer or the tablet or the phone on their own and everything is moved, they don't have to do anything anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, my gosh, I can't use this anymore. So you got to take it slow and be very careful.
Yeah, I remember when my husband installed Chrome on my mother-in-law's computer because he was like, it's so much faster, you have to use Chrome. And I was like, she doesn't have to be that much faster. She doesn't have to use Chrome because she was so unhappy with it. I think the other thing that people do is they say, like, oh, it's so easy. This is so easy. Like, it's so simple. And that can be frustrating too, right?
Yeah, because you know what? A lot of it isn't that easy, and a lot of it isn't that simple. Silicon Valley has, for all of the sort of focus that Steve Jobs and Apple have brought to simplicity, things have gotten pretty complicated lately, particularly For example, iOS 11. Have you played around with the beta of that? Like, it now requires more. I mean, it's very powerful. It's much more like a laptop, but there's a lot of stuff in there that even someone in my role would not have figured out just on my own. I had to have somebody show me, walk me through and explain, okay, if you swipe up from the bottom, that's going to lead to these showing up, and this is what you can do now. So I think Silicon Valley has really lost touch in a lot of ways with simplicity. One thing they could do actually to get back in touch with it is maybe hire some seniors to do testing on apps and devices before they come to market. You know, they can be the canary in the coal mine. If a senior citizen can't figure it out, maybe it's not as intuitive as you thought.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the same point of a lot of topics that we've talked about on the show, just being diverse in general from that very reason, just as one of many reasons for a shift in perspective, because that ends up informing the creation of that product so that the end user, all end users, are represented as far as their particular use cases. How much of a responsibility do you think tech companies have in creating their devices for all types of users in that way?
I think that they should take it much more seriously. Like, it's a significant portion of the population, both in the U.S. and internationally, are senior citizens. And here in the U.S. and in some other developed markets, it's a growing part of the market. So first of all, they're ignoring a potential market. Mm-hmm. But second of all, tech companies, as you know, you talk to folks all the time, like to talk about how they're changing the world and they want to make the world a better place. Great. I love that. But if you want a population that could really be helped out through technology, could make the world a better place, senior citizens are one of them. I mean, the advantages of technology for communication could be incredible for seniors who are isolated at home, can't really get out. Or also think of what you could do with financial tools that you can get on a computer or an iPad or a phone. That can really help out a lot of seniors who, for example, really struggle with their finances. And maybe Airbnb would be a great way to bring in an extra couple $100 a month that could really make a difference in their lives. Well, the other example is fitness trackers. I scoured the Fitbit website looking for the photographs of the kinds of people they showed using Fitbits, and it was pretty much all young, fit people who look like they could just run a marathon. Whereas think about the benefits that senior citizens who just need to maybe get a little more active for their health or for their happiness or their general outlook on life, what they could get out of using that technology to help them keep track of their activity level and get them to get up and go. So there's a lot of opportunity here for Silicon Valley to make a difference in the world that, again, people here just sort of ignore.
Okay, so if we're not so good at giving tips to our parents and other seniors, where can they get help?
You know what? The number one place I would start is your local public library. 62% of American libraries, according to a study from the ALA, the American Library Association, a couple years ago, 62% of them offer free support on how to use new technology. To try this out, I popped over just on a random Sunday to a tech seniors help hour or out 2 hours at a branch library here in San Francisco. And the kid volunteers, like a teenager. He was so popular. Like, I thought there was going to be kind of an old lady brawl trying to get his attention because they all wanted a little bit of his time. So seniors are using these things and they should know that they're there. And the more people that use them, the more volunteers there will be and the better an outcome. So definitely libraries are a place to go. There's also a lot of senior centers now that offer this kind of training. My colleagues went to one in New York City that was amazing called Senior Planet. And you've got some video of it showing there. And it was like a college dorm, but for senior citizens. Like, everybody's just hanging out, playing, learning how to do things. And it really showed that when you sort of build learning about technology into a community and in communication and communicate it in a way that seniors understand, they can really be into it just as much as anyone else.
You also make a really good point, and I know I feel at least a little guilty of this, not with my parents, but with my kids, about hand-me-down technology, about technology that you've maybe, come to the end of your terms with, but then you think, well, a device for someone that didn't have a device is better than no device at all, so you end up passing it down to your parents or whatever, and you kind of offload that miserable experience, whatever it is. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. And again, not something I would have thought about until I started talking with folks who work with a lot of senior citizens with technology. But mom deserves a new iPad too. If the device isn't working well enough for you to do the things that you would want to do, why do you think it's going to be a great experience for mom either? The other thing that can happen is if mom or grandma has the new iPad, it actually combats ageism, right? So you show up, she shows up with the grandkids or whoever else, and they see her using that new iPad Pro. They're like, wow, grandma's got it going on. I want to play with her iPad and hang out with her. And I think that's a great thing for families and for senior citizens.
What about devices that are specifically directed at seniors? What do you think of those?
I have not had a great experience with many of them. And I heard the same from folks who, like at Senior Planet, who work with a lot of seniors, helping them learn tech. The number one problem is this: a lot of these devices are really designed for disabilities. And yes, some senior citizens have disabilities. They have eye vision problems, or they might have hearing problems. But that's not what defines being a senior citizen. What defines being a senior citizen is, having being from a different generation and having maybe a different set of needs and a way to learn. And if you give seniors just disability devices, oftentimes they sort of take them out of the platforms that they want to and need to be part of to really to get the most out of their devices. For example, a senior-focused tablet that forces you to use certain apps for video chatting might not allow you to Skype with your family or iMessage funny gifts to your grandkids. So there's a lot of value in keeping seniors in these mainstream platforms so they can be using the same stuff as all the people around them rather than being siloed.
Yeah, I think that gets back to your point before, that Silicon Valley often ignores this population. So it's like, here's this thing that's great for seniors, but they don't really test it on them or anything like that.
Right.
Well, Geoffrey, thank you so much for joining us. Geoffrey Fowler is a personal technology columnist from the Wall Street Journal. He can be found at WSJ.com and Geoffrey Fowler on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate it. Have a great night.